Today we kōrero with the impactful and inspiring Dr. Phil Borell, a senior lecturer at the University of Canterbury. Now, big call, but I'm pretty sure he is the biggest Wars fan that Aotearoa have. He even turned up with his Wars socks today, so I'm going to back that call and say that I'm pretty accurate. He is a massive part of the rugby league community. He's a dad, he's an innovator, and he is an awesome role model. We kōrero about te tiriti o Waitangi, contact sport and the need to take the mask off, finding joy in the things that you're doing, his mahi with rangatahi, and building and contributing to your community and how important that is. Let's get into it. Kia ora, Phil, and thank you so much for coming all the way from Christchurch today to our whare in the Tron in Hamilton. We're so grateful to have you, so thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
I'm just so excited. Dan Walker, one of our major friends of the Good Day Matrix, was like, you need to talk to Dr. Phil. And that's where
Yeah, I hope I can live up to the hype.
You started getting hassled by me to have a kōrero. So we always start our interviews with one of our wellbeing cards. And it's just all about, instead of just saying, hey, how are you? And then carrying on, just asking some deeper questions. So feel free to pick.
I'll go right in the middle.
If you read it out for us and then answer what you've got.
Okay. So, when you are 80 years old, what will matter to you the most? And you just, any answer for this?
Any answer.
Any answer for this? It will have something to do with my kids, possibly their kids, I'm not sure. So I've got two sons. At the moment, one's 13, one's 3.
Oh, wow.
Told the 3-year-old this morning when I dropped them off that, hey, you got to look after mum and big brother this weekend. So when I'm 80, if I make it to 80, I guess their happiness, where they're at, that they're both boys, so that they just grow into the men that they want to be. I'll be pretty stoked. Yeah, that would suit me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty cool legacy to leave at 80, right?
I think so. I think everything for me anyway is about what I can do to make my kids have a good life, compared to what myself and my wife grew up with. So if I get to 80 and they've had a good life and they're happy, I'll be stoked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, Phil. So tell us about you. Tell us about you and your whakapapa.
So I was born and raised in Christchurch, so I actually whakapapa closer to here. I'm going to try and sneak over to Tauranga this weekend while I'm up here. So my whakapapa is to Ngāti Ranginui, so the hapu of Perirako, in Te Puna, which is just outside of Tauranga. So my dad's from there, but I was born and raised in Christchurch. He met my mum down there, and then I was raised by my mum down there. So that's kind of like the nutshell background. I came up from... how much do you want to know about that?
Keep going.
Just keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So, grew up with my mum. We grew up in a place called Brindwa. And if you know the geography of Christchurch, it's the only suburb with no vowels in it. Okay,
really?
So Bryndwr. And it's kind of a funky little part of town because you've got a roundabout, and on one side you've got Fenelton.
Yeah.
So some people know Fenelton, it's kind of an old money part of Christchurch. And then bordering that, you've got Ilam through to Burnside, and then sort of in the middle, you've got Brindwa. And it's kind of the state housing area of that, sort of jammed in between these more affluent areas. But that's where I grew up. That's where all my mates were. And then we used to, we were typical late 80s, early 90s kids, run around in the streets and turn lampposts into cricket wickets and, Coke bottles into rugby balls and all that sort of stuff. So... grew up there, and I wasn't really connected to my taha Māori at that point in time, and because my old man hadn't been around, he left when I was about 18 months old. Wow. So that for me was a bit of a void, and so much as I knew I was Māori, Mum had always told me I was Māori, and she didn't know anything about our iwi or whakapapa or anything like that, but she did what she could. She studied Te Reo Māori by correspondence. So back in those days, it wasn't an online thing. Yeah. It was literally cassette tapes and recording and sending them back. And she was doing everything she could to try and give me some sense of Māori identity. And so Mum was pretty awesome. And then when I was 10, that's when my father actually passed away. Oh, wow. So that was the first time I went up to Tauranga. Was for his tangi, and the first memory I have of him is in a casket in the marae. And so that's, I guess, was a huge turning point for me, because it was like, cool, I'm meeting all my Borell whānau. Everyone here's got the same last name as me. I'm meeting all these cousins, all these aunties, uncles. But at the same time, even at 10 years old, I was quite cognizant that there was a huge gap. You know, so these people are my family, but I don't know them.
Yeah.
You know, at all. And so that was kind of a pretty much a turning point in my life as well. So at that point, I went from there into like intermediate school, started learning Māori language, stuff like that. Also became a bit more of a rebellious sort of preteen kid, if that makes sense. You know, like I think for young men, you know, if you lose your father, even if he wasn't even around you, there's this kind of this sense of abandonment and loss and all this stuff that came together. And so I took it out on my mum, which was super, super stink in retrospect, you know, and retrospect's a great thing. Hindsight's a great thing. And she passed away 5 years ago in 2019. And so I have a lot of conflicted emotion around that, because there was a turning point where I found this new identity in terms of my taha Māori, and I've pursued that for the last 30 years. But it also changed me in a way where I became less of the son that she had known up until that point, and more of this guy that I thought I needed to be at that point. So, yeah, I became a bit of a dick, to put it pretty blunt. So that's kind of how I grew up. And that almost in that moment, I went from this sort of doting, living little kid, mummy's boy, to a guy who thought he was the king ding-a-ling, and I thought he was the man at 10, 11 years old, and you know, started acting up and hanging out with people that, you know, certainly weren't bad people or anything like that, but probably made some silly choices back over the decade following that moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then that sort of led me into, I guess it was a pathway to where I am now, because I ended up going through this sort of cultural connection, which led me to study after high school. I was a bit naughty at high school. So I ended up actually getting kicked out of high school in my 7th form year. So revealing my age, 7th form, what we call year 13 now.
I do the same.
Yeah, no,
I
it sucks.
count and be like, year 13 is right, Richard.
I know, it's not until you got kids that are going through it and you realise, now I know how that works.
Yeah.
But yes, I actually got kicked out of my last year of school because again, I was a bit naughty, I was acting up in that. And it was quite a funny story, because I was actually the last Māori in that form at that school. I won't name the school because it's ancient history, but I don't want to hold it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they kicked me out, and then they realised that there was no Māori that were going to graduate the 7th form year, so they brought me back. And I actually got a certificate at the final assembly for being the top Māori student, because I was the only Māori student. So yeah, that was kind of cool in a way. But then I went on and I went into tertiary education, where I did a diploma of Māori studies, because I hadn't actually passed anything other than, I think, graphic design in that final year, so I couldn't go straight to university. So I did a diploma of Māori studies, and then that took me into uni. And aside from dropping out after the first year and attempting an apprenticeship, which I thought was really cool until winter came along, and like working outside mixing buckets of plaster in like -3 degrees, I was like, I'm going back to uni.
It's cracked up to be.
Yeah, I'll go back to uni. And then I've been there ever since. So I've actually been at UC for pretty close to 20 years.
Wow.
20 years.
So tell us about the Māori and Indigenous studies that you do with the UC, and sort of how people can better understand the kaupapa that you're working on, and can we support that in any way?
In terms of what we teach? It's an interesting space to be in, I think, because we're living in a time now where a lot of kids are coming through kura kaupapa, or they're coming through with a really strong Māori identity, and so we have to be prepared for kids that already know things that we're talking about in classes. When I came to university, I was kind of finding my identity in Te Ao Māori. You know, and university was a really great place for me to do that. There were other Māori students. We had Māori Students Association, you know, national conferences in Hui that we could all attend. And so a lot of students over the last 20 or so years since I've been there, they've been coming looking for that connection. But now we're seeing a huge influx of students who already have that connection. And so we're kind of adapting to that. Actually, the reason I'm up here at the moment is we have what's called our Masters of Māori and Indigenous Leadership, which we take to different marae. And we actually teach it around the country. So that's where I met Dan last year, was teaching him in Tāmaki. This year we're in Kirikiriroa. And so that's a great one because people don't have to come to us and they come in with this knowledge that they already have, but they get to learn it in their whenua, which is really, really cool. And in a kaupapa Māori space, there's nothing I enjoy more than teaching on marae because I get to go to all the different marae. Like, if it wasn't for this gig, I'd probably know my own marae, local marae down where I live through kapahaka and stuff like that. But I've been all around the country to different marae now, so it's really, really cool. Māori and Indigenous studies that you see, I don't know, it's a really, I love my job kind of thing that I have to tell people all the time. I just love it. I teach mainly te tiriti.
Yeah.
So.
And you can tell, by the way, that you love your job. You just spark up as soon as...
not many.
There's bright eyes and then there's brighter eyes.
I was flying up with my boss today and we were both talking about like how good we've got it.
Yeah.
Like I turn up to work and I talk about things I'm passionate about. I talk about things that I want to research, like I've managed to create what I call a bit of a nexus point where, Te Ao Māori is something that's given me a career. And then I get to share that with other people. But at the same time, I've managed to weave in my love for like rugby league and sport and stuff into it. So there's never a day I'm not happy to go to work, which is, I think, maybe that should have been my answer for the card. Like if I can get to 80 and just know that I loved everything I did in that point in time, because, it's a fun gig. And teaching te tiriti studies, like at the risk of pigeonholing particular demographics, like we have a real opportunity to shift the way that people think, and one of my favorite groups of students is the people who have maybe a few years out of workforce, they're retired, they've lived a life, they've seen everything, and they have a very fixed mindset or a fixed view of what Te Ao Māori is, what te tiriti means, what obligations we have as a nation on, for our Indigenous population, things like that. And then they come out of it after 12 weeks and they're just like, wow, I was wrong. Or maybe not I was wrong, but, you've opened my eyes to new things.
Perspective, eh?
Yeah, it's mean. And so I love my job.
Yeah.
I love teaching.
And it's not an unfortunate thing, but so many of us have only been sort of fed little parts of a story, if that makes sense. And so when I studied teaching even, we were opened up so much more to Te Ao Māori and to learning about the treaty and what it actually meant, not just these surface words of sovereignty and bits and bobs, but actually what does this mean and what happened and how do we actually support it going forward and how do we do better. And it's just when we're not informed, and unfortunately we're not often as well informed as we should, and we kind of listen to a headline and go, oh yeah, outrage, but actually what does it mean and why is it so important and how can we actually, from a Pākehā perspective, how do we do better? And that's what I love about your mahi, because we did a big deep dive and had a look at all the work and it's so cool, and it's just trying to get as many people to understand and believe that they've got agency to make change.
Big time. And I don't think people can, you talk about, we've got to do better, or how do we do better, be better. You can't do that until you know.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's why we've got to be really critical how we think about things as well, because, we can go to outrage really quickly. But it's like, okay, well, why does that person not know?
Yeah.
And whose obligation is it to teach them? Because, there'll be certain people in certain camps that's like, well, like, you guys need to go off and learn this. But then we're going to get pissed off because you're teaching yourself and we need to teach you because it's not tika if we don't teach you. So it's about trying to create balance, harmony, but recognizing that everyone's at a different start point.
Yeah.
And, there's a quote that I think it's Maya Angelou that's like, once you know better, do better. And I think that's one of those things. Like once we know the stuff, then we can go out into the world and then we can have an impact, then we can make change. We've got some amazing people who've come through our programs that become such staunch allies or such staunch advocates, purely because they're learning things they didn't already know.
Yeah.
You know, and I think as a nation we could really benefit just from taking the time to learn even our local histories.
Yep.
You know, we're sitting here in Kirikiriroa. Okay, cool. What do we know of Waikato Tainui? You know, what do we know of the raupatu that occurred? You know, how much land was confiscated around here?
Yeah.
Whose hands did it end up in after the fact? You know, what do we know other than there was a treaty settlement in the 90s and millions of dollars in fiscal caps and people talking about, Māori are getting all this money. So, okay, well, what do we know as we peel it back?
Yeah, let's actually peel back some layers and understand more. Yeah, 100%. And there's so many quotes you could go into as well, but like once you, like from Maya Angelou's one, like, you know, if you overturn a stone and you learn something, you don't get to put the stone back and pretend.
No,
you know, like, you know how they're like, leave no stone unturned. No, if you overturn it then and you see it, you can't just be like, too hard basket.
No, you've got a duty now.
You've got a duty now.
You've got a duty now. Yeah, you've got an obligation. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people who kind of want to keep the blinders up, you know, or they want to stay oblivious or sort of say, oh, you know, that's not for me.
Yeah.
But I think as a nation, Aotearoa, we have an obligation to understand our own histories.
Yeah.
I think I offended a few teachers at the start of the year. I did a bit of a keynote at a college in Christchurch, and you know, I sort of challenged them, like, you know, let's teach accurate histories. To which I heard from the crowd, there was a bit of a, we do, and I was like, okay, I don't want to ruffle too many feathers. I understand people work really hard, and you know, they have their perceptions of histories, but bring in the local iwi, bring in the local hapu, hear their histories, okay, because so much of our history has come from the side who has I guess the power to write it.
Yeah.
You know, and there's so much that goes unsaid or unacknowledged. So
Yeah.
But we get to bring that to light in our job.
That's
you know, how
so
cool is
cool.
that?
Yeah.
And we get to challenge thinking and we get to provoke, and you know, sometimes people get upset.
Yeah.
And I've got a few provocations for our wānanga tomorrow that I was talking to a colleague today. I was like, I'm going to open with this question. What do you think? And she's like, oh, bro. Are you sure? And I was like, yeah, but I'll give them till Sunday to answer it. You know, I'm just going to ask a question, put it at the back of their mind, and they can think about it as we go through each workshop and each session. And then Sunday they can feed back to me what they think of the question. And so I think there's always, when you're in education, there's always opportunities to plant seeds.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have a real big thing about making sure that people call me doctor, and people say you're an expert and all this sort of stuff, and it's great in certain spaces and times, but you don't know more than everybody on everything, you know. And so many times you can be humbled in this position where you're like, oh, I'm going to talk about this, and then someone will quietly listen, and then an hour later they'll be like, oh, that person you're talking about was my uncle. Yeah. And here's the real story.
Yeah.
Like, wow. You know, it's only so much you can get from books.
Exactly. Here's the sidebar of and again, it's just, if we think we know stuff, or if we're only reading, you know, books from particular authors, or listening to particular podcasts that don't challenge our thinking or teach us a new perspective. Like, I've made a massive effort this year to read books that are totally outside of where I would normally read. So from queer, from black, from everyone, just trying to hear new aspects of how they feel and what's going on, because it's called ordinary privilege, and I'm sure you know about it, but like, I have lots of ordinary privilege. I'm white, I'm female, and I take those for granted. I don't think about them every day, but we need to think about it, and I need to pay attention to those who don't have that ordinary privilege. And then how can I actually understand more about it, and how can I ask questions and learn? Because the more I can, then the more I can help give voice or give support where I can to make it.
And that's so cool.
Yeah.
First of all, that's so cool.
Easier said than done. And I'm in the beginning stages of all these things, but it's being aware that I don't know everything, and I've only heard one side, and I want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. My neighbour, she popped round yesterday. I was just putting my young fella down to bed, and I hear this knock on the door, and I was like, "Who's knocking on the door at 7:30? You know, and like, what's going on? It's winter. It's dark. You know, no one knock on my door at night time." And then it's my neighbour. She's a middle-aged Pākehā woman. Yeah. And she works for MSD on the front line, and she knocks on the door and she's like, "Oh, Phil, have you got 5 minutes?" And I was like, "Oh, look, I'm putting my boy down, and I am about to head away for 4 days. Like, I don't want to miss this cuddle." But I was like, "I got 5 minutes. What do you need?" And she's like, so I'm doing a whānau order course, and I need to learn a whakatauki. And so, you know, a whakatauki, like a proverb.
Sure.
And so I was like, okay, what do you need a whakatauki for? She's like, I need one about wairua. And I was like, okay, Lynette, come inside.
Yeah, I'm your man.
I've got 6 minutes for you now. But, you know, we sat down, we had a chat. And so I was like, okay, I wrote it down for her. I was like, here's a whakatauki that I think you could use. And she's like, oh, cool, I need a karakia to it. I thought, we don't have time for that tonight. I'll text you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, she's got my phone number. She doesn't need to knock on the door. But then she was telling me, she's like, I had this moment at work the other day where one of her clients was telling her, but I'm not privileged like you. I can't, da-da-da-da-da. And Lynette, you know, she's a widower. So, you know, her husband died some time ago. So she's a single mum. Her daughter's just moved up to Auckland. So she's living alone. And we're in a very working class suburb. You know, she's certainly not rich. And she said to me, she's like, Phil, I'd never thought of myself as privileged. And I was like, okay. And how did that, not only how did that make you feel, but how did she explain that to you? And she's like, well, you know, she's 17, she's Māori, and she's got a kid. And then she tells me that I'm white. And I was like, yeah, how did that make you feel? And she's like, well, I know enough to know that I'm not offended by being called white, but I had never thought of white as something that's just ordinary, right? Ordinary privilege or normal, the norm, the status quo. And so I was like, okay, all of a sudden I've got 12 minutes for you now. and like, we didn't go into a deep unpacking of it, but I just thought it was really cool. You know, really cool that this woman, I say middle-aged, but I don't actually know what middle-aged is anymore.
Yeah.
But, you know, she's a bit older than me anyway.
80.
Yeah, give or take, right? But I just thought it was so refreshing to hear this woman talking about that and saying, you know, this young Māori girl who'd come into work had informed her of her privilege.
Yeah.
And I thought it was cool for two reasons, because, you know, you've got a Pākehā woman who's recognising her privilege, but then a young girl who's comfortable enough to say it.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, you know, that was a really cool moment.
Yeah.
And then I had to be like, okay, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Put the boy down now. So I'm going to walk you out, Lynette. I'll turn the light on for you. And then if you have any problems, just give me a text. But yeah, it was a cool moment.
Yeah.
It was a really cool moment.
And cool that you can be that person for her too.
Yeah. She comes over for a bit of help every now
Yeah.
and then. It's awesome.
That's awesome. Change of theme. So we're going to the WAS. So you are an avid WAS supporter.
Yeah, I got my WAS hat over there.
mean,
I wasn't sure if I should wear it.
Worn it. They would have loved it.
I got my socks. Don't know if you can see them.
It's priceless. Oh, you made my day. WAS socks, WAS.
WAS, everything. I was going to wear a WAS top. I didn't have time to get changed.
You should have. You've talked a lot about sort of that contact sport and the need to kind of take our mask off and talk about how we're building trust and changing the narrative. So talk to us about that in terms of our contact sports and
Yeah. So this is a big passion of mine too. Yeah.
We're nailing it.
Nailing it tonight. Yeah. I guess so. For me, this all interrelated. Yeah. So if I go back over things, I apologize in advance. No. But about that same time that my dad passed away, was when I started questioning probably my masculine identity, I think. And so for me, as sort of a 10-year-old kid in a rougher part of town, you know, it's kind of like, you've been raised by a mum, you're soft, you know, all these sorts of things. It's the sort of mid-90s, the Warriors are just about to come out on TV. But Winfield Cup, like, I don't know if you remember, like, that era, you know, you had Mel Meninga and Ruben Wiki on one side and Matthew Ridge on the other, and they were kind of the two teams that Kiwi supported. It was Canberra and Manly, and every Sunday you could watch them on TV. And I just remember watching rugby league and thinking, far out, this is the champ. This is how you prove yourself to be a man, right? You go out onto a field and you smash people. Yep. And so at that point I was begging Mum. I was like, can I play? And she's like, look, we don't have any connections to a league club. We didn't have a car. And so it was like, you know, you're 10 years old, you're not going to bike across town and play league. So I had to wait. I had to keep playing hockey with our family friends who would pick me up. But then at intermediate, they had a league team. And for me, I was like, this is me.
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. And it's funny because I was terrible, right? Like, I was so scared. And like, you know, the physicality, actually, I was like, this is harder than I thought.
Yeah.
thought I'd be out here and be real
Yes.
tough, but everyone's
Yeah.
way tougher than me. But yeah, they kind of, for me, league has been a lifelong passion. You know, whether it's been playing or as a fan. Like now, I'm a coach. You know, I'm a trainer with our premier team. I'm the chairman or the chairperson of Canterbury Rugby League as of last week. So that happened.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So league is a huge part of my life. I did my whole doctorate. So my whole doctoral thesis is looking at Polynesian experiences in professional rugby league. And so that's where this kind of crossroads occurred, where I was sort of, because I was talking to NRL players, right? And so there's, again, these Adonises that you're going to meet coffee with, and I'm like, oh, you know, my wife's dropping me off, and I'm like, why are you so dressed up? Why are you coming inside? Oh, okay, yeah, I get it. We're meeting up with this 24-year-old, you know, jacked ass stud. Oh, fair enough, babe. I would too. But, you know,
Best
like...
foot forward.
That's it, you know, and shoot your shot, babe, I got you, eh? But, like, I'm talking to these guys, and for 80 minutes a week on TV, they're just smashing each other again, like, you know, and this is a big part of what we love about the sport. You know, my whole thing was, like, I'm meeting these guys, and they're so lovely.
Yeah.
And half of them were fathers, and they were the most doting fathers. All they want to talk about is their kid. You know, the other ones who were younger, didn't have parents, they want to talk about their mum. Or they talk about their sisters, you know, or they talk about their mates or their granddad or this sort of stuff. But they didn't really talk about violence, you know, and they didn't talk about being bigger, stronger, faster. They talked about all these other meaningful things in their life, and it was so cool. And yeah, for a while I've been sort of questioning how we position masculine identities and who determines and controls masculine identities, because I think for a lot of men, particularly of my generation, my sort of age, we grew up around those Jake the Muss type figures, the iconic gangster movies that were coming out of the States in the 90s, you know, that hip-hop culture, the misogyny that comes with that. Like, I'm still a huge hip-hop head, but I can also think critically through what I'm listening to, and I know what I don't want my sons to listen to yet, or if they do, I hope they can understand, you know, that sort of stuff. So I had a lot of questions about what shapes our masculine identities, and then particularly, as you mentioned, like for our physical contact sports, because we are taught from a young age, rip his head off, smash him, you know, all of those things. And then you've got people who are being paid potentially millions of dollars to do exactly that, but that is not their identity at all. You know, that's not their identity, that's their occupation.
Yeah.
That's their job. And, you know, I can't speak for all people. I only had a very small data set. But even the guys at my league club, you know, my 3-year-old, he's in the under 5 team. He's the only one still in nappies. And sometimes I worry that we've gone too young, but like, he, you know, his coaches are so great, so that I work with them because they're premier players.
Yeah.
And they work with my son. I love the sort of intergenerational element to it, but they are absolute killers on the field.
Yeah.
These guys are weapons, and they are so nurturing of my son, you know, and because he cries every time he touches the ball, because he's a baby, you know.
Figuring it out.
He's figuring it out, and like 2 weeks ago before the long weekend, he had probably his best run ever, and because he saw me in the corner, so he's trying to find me, he's trying to get to me, and then they rip his tag, and he starts crying again. And my instinct is to run to him and give him a hug, and he's already hugging his coach. You know, and so these guys, they become safe adult figures. They, you know, and this is where I think, you know, for someone who loves the physicality of rugby league, grew to love it anyway. I also love the soft side of it, you know, and I think this is where we need to challenge these narratives of our masculinity, because it's not always about the physicality that you see. You know, it's the guy that, I don't know, gets told he's going to debut for first grade and is on the phone crying to his nan.
Yeah.
You know, and like you see videos like that all the time. That's the real human. Yeah. You know, what we see on TV makes up a very small percentage of them. So a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment is trying to challenge those, I guess, stereotypes might be the word, but I guess the narratives around our masculinity and where they came from, because particularly as Māori and Pasifika men, a lot of the warrior narrative comes through all the time, and I understand the irony with my warrior socks on, like, you know, we talk about the warriors, so I do understand, how sort of oxymoronic this is going to come across, but at the same time, that warrior template or that warrior stereotype, that was brought from somewhere else. That wasn't necessarily ours, you know, we have been framed as that. That's an impact of colonization itself. So I think it's really great if we can challenge it. And look at what did our men do in our oral traditions. You know, there are some really stink ones where they were violent, but there's also other ones where they were great fathers. I've got a PhD student at the moment who I'm supervising, and he's looking at the unsung narrative of Māori fatherhood through oral tradition and through contemporary storytelling. So it's like, we know that there's a script to be flipped. You know what I mean? It's just managing to peel back the layers and, you know, without cherry picking and saying, oh yeah, we were absolutely amazing, because, you know, nobody is. No one's perfect, but we can change the dominant narrative anyway.
And it's storytelling that will change things.
Oh, absolutely.
The more that we can connect to the stories and the more we can have people hear them, then the more that we can actually affect change. If we're going, the data on this is blah, blah, blah.
No one wants to see data.
Don't tune in. But if there's a story, and if it's a retellable story, if you can then go, I just heard this amazing human talk about this and it was amazing, then I've got that story that I can then share. And
that's
back to that oral history of that's how we're starting to share and change.
And that's how we've always done it.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about Māori and Pacific people, but globally. You know, we've always been oral cultures everywhere, and then we write things down and they become rigid, they become fixed. You know, as soon as it's in a book, that's what it is. There's no room for dynamism. You know, we can't be fluid, and I'm not saying that we need to skew histories by being completely fluid, that we make them up or reinvent them. But there is something beautiful in storytelling that can't be captured just by having it on a piece of paper. You know what I mean? And so I think, storytelling's it's a huge part of my teaching. It's a huge part of the way I engage with people. I think, you know, just now we're telling stories, we're sharing. I think that's one of the most genuine ways to share knowledge. From a research methodology perspective, I know this is taking it completely in a different direction, but that's one of the things I share all the time, and I'll be sharing it this weekend, is why we have to stick to conventional methods of research. Like you say, like not everyone wants to see data, right? No one wants. Sometimes a pretty graph is pretty cool. You know, if you can make it look right, like,
and if it really makes a good point, you're like,
oh yeah. And I'll take your stats. I'll take your stats if they can serve a purpose. But sometimes you just want to hear someone tell a genuine story about life experience. You know, and I think life experience is as valid as scientific research in so many different spaces, because we can actually learn from other people's experience. You know, but we don't seem to value that as highly as science.
I'm not going to go into this too much, but that storytelling element. So we work with a lot of charity groups or community organisations who are trying to change the game for our youth, for our rangatahi, for different groups that they work with. And they don't often have like the core data, stats and surveys and measurable things, but they have these stories of lives that have changed. And they don't get valued when they're going for more funding to continue doing the mahi that they're doing. And it just drives me a little bit bonkers, because we know that some things are just not measurable. Like you can't measure somebody's well-being, which is going to lead me straight into athlete well-being anyway. But it's frustrating.
KPIs and outcomes do not match what is actually happening on the ground. I totally agree. Totally agree.
So you've developed a framework around athlete wellbeing, and you're also working on one for athlete whānau. So talk to us, athletes whānau. So talk to us about that. And
so the model that I created is called Te Waka Kōti. So Kōti is kind of like a peak. So it's almost an odd metaphor to use, because a waka, we think of ocean, and a peak as being maunga, but it's kind of in terms of being aspirational, like trying to achieve a summit of some sort through the waka. So it's based on a waka ama. So you have the tākere, which is your hull, and the tākere is, for how I use it, is professional sport. And so the paddler is, or the kaihoi is the athlete. And so you can be in a tākere, you can be in a canoe or a waka, and you can paddle it, and it can be stable. But the problem is when you get out into open waters, it's not that stable. All right, so you need something to lean into, and that's where the ama comes in. So we have the tākere, professional sport, kaihui, athlete. And what I found is that we tend to lean into most is our whānau. So the ama is the whānau. The ama is bound to the waka through what we call kia tō, and there are two kia tō which hold the ama to the, or which bind the ama to the waka, and they are identity and support. So we have identity, which is formed in the whānau, and if we can connect the whānau to whatever, it could be any pathway. It doesn't have to be professional sport, it could be anything. But if we can keep our whānau connected to the athlete in terms of their identity, but also as a support mechanism, then we're a lot more stable. All right. So the idea is behind it is that you've got the tākere or the hau, and you could paddle on a lake, sweet as. But most professional sporting pathways aren't in a lake.
Yeah.
They're overseas. So we've got to be able to traverse seas, and the ama allows us to do that. So yeah, we are more likely as athletes to find success if we have strong support and identity, and whatever vocation we're going into allows for us to keep connected to our whānau. And that was just, again, through that the PhD journey, talking to athletes, and just how hard the journey can be when you're dislocated from your family, from your culture, from your identity. One of the guys I spoke to, he went over to Aussie to play footy at 17, so he finished his last day of high school here, and he was straight on a flight over there. And he was placed in an athlete home, and so it was like an apartment building. They had a caregiver, which I think he said something, I probably saw him once a week. So he's 17 years old, he's still a kid, and he's over there. His mum, he had a solo mum at the time. She had a partner, but she'd raised him for most of his life as a single mother. She'd done all this fundraising, so she sent him over there with like $3,000, $4,000, and that was to sort him out, and get over there. And he was like, well, I had to buy a car because I had to get to training and all that sort of jazz. And then I didn't know if or when I was actually going to get paid, so I had to make the rest last for food. And I was like, okay, so what was your living conditions like? He's like, I did do a run down to Kmart, got a blow-up bed, a duvet, and a pillow. And that's all he had in his room, So he had a blow-up bed, duvet, pillow, and a pretty beat-up car. And he said it was the most trying time of his life. I think he's 22 now, 22. But he said he rang his mum every night in tears, just like, I can't do it. I'm not going to make it. I've got to come home, and she's like, look, son, I'll come over. I'll come over and see you when I've got the money. I'll come over and see you. And it got to the point where his agent was actually ringing her saying, no, don't come over. No, you mother him too much. He needs to learn how to survive without you. But she knew what the best thing for his son was, because it's his mum.
Yep.
Mums know best.
Yep.
we know it. Like parents, as kids, we don't want to hear our parents telling us what's the best thing for us, but they know, or they know what they think it is. And so she's like, nah, stuff this, I'm going to come over. And she saw him, and she saw how he was living. She just, broke her heart. He was upset, she was upset, and things went a bit wonky then. But knowing that his mum could come over, then she spoke to the club, and then they started to realise how important she was to him. And now he's a first grade NRL player with over 50 caps. He's got over 50 games. And he will play for the Kiwis very soon, I'm pretty sure. Like, he's been there or thereabouts, but injuries and those sorts of things. So he's a phenomenal athlete. He's in the game for a long time. But I don't think he would be if it wasn't for the support of his mum.
Yeah.
And so I think so often parents forget that if your kid's going to make it in the NRL particularly, they're going to be a 3 or 4 hour flight away from you. And whether or not they're going to handle that often is going to come down to you. And this is what led us to thinking about, well, what's the family well-being thing? Because we've got this framework where you can lean into the family for your well-being, but who do they lean into? And so that research is still sort of happening at the moment. We've just got some funding, some seed funding to do a pilot. So I don't have any answers for
No,
that yet. But, you know.
Just the concept of thinking about it, you know, like I bet you there's a lot of people listening right now who haven't ever thought about that. They've kind of gone, oh yeah, they had the empty nest kind of whatever vibe that happens when your kid leaves, but I don't think anyone thinks about actually what those parents then go through, because it's a total transition. But it's also a piece of your heart now lives 4 hours away.
Yeah.
And when they say they're not okay and you can't get there quickly, like that's hard.
Well, and they're children.
Yeah.
They're children. They're not only are they your children, but they are still children. Mentally and physically, they are children, you know, and we expect them at 18 years old to act like they're 30.
Yeah.
And to be honest, even at 30, I was still a immature little idiot, you know, like some of these kids are going over at 14, 15 with no parental support, or they might have like an auntie or an uncle. But more often than not, they're going into club housing situations where they're not being looked after. And this is one of the biggest challenges that myself and a few other colleagues are wishing to put out there. And, you know, like, as a sporting organisation, as big as you are, making millions and millions and millions of dollars a year, you have an obligation to these kids, but you have an obligation to their family as well, to do right by their kids.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't imagine, my kids are still pretty young, but if they decided that they wanted to do something like that, I can't imagine sitting at home thinking, have they got something to eat tonight? Have they got a bed tonight? You know, rather than thinking, oh, cool, they're going to play NRL.
Yeah.
You know, and you'd know it from the netball scene as well. You know, like there's people that are relocating and moving around in pursuit of the dream, but the dream doesn't always look like what they think it does. You know,
Yeah.
so
I've got some very clear examples of that. But yeah, I agree, and it's when somebody trusts you with their child, even if they're 17 or 18, it's still trusting you with their child.
yeah, big time.
We need to take that really seriously, and I think a lot of sporting organisations could heed that message. And then I look forward to your research. Well, we should share your research actually with this. We will.
Yeah, love to.
Around the athlete part, but also when the whānau part is done as well, because I think it's really
That should be done by the end of the year. Cool. So that's the plan. But, you know, like one of the guys I spoke to, he went over 16 as well, 16, 17. And the best way that the club he had signed with thought to look after him was put him with his 20-year-old brother. So they put them both in an apartment and say, okay, your brother's your dad now. Like, it's just, it was a recipe for disaster. So, no, a lot of learning needs to happen in those spaces. I know that they're improving all the time, and there's some really great advisory groups over there now. And I've managed to connect up with a few of the different wellbeing, what are they called? Wellbeing officers, managers at different clubs and stuff like that. So I know good things are happening in places. But again, it's like that whole thing, well, once you know better, do better. We can always be better. Yeah.
Now, in 2023, you won a very exciting award from the University of Canterbury for your teaching. So talk to us about that, because just talking to you when I first got to meet you, and now just sitting here with you now, like, I wish so bad that you'd gotten to be a teacher of mine at some point, or been taught by someone who's as passionate and energetic as you, because it must change the game for so many people who come into your classes or come into the study programs with you. So talk to us about the award you got, but also, do you have any values that are like your non-negotiables in any environment that you go into, whether it's home or work?
Okay, all right. So the award was the University of Canterbury's Teaching Medal, which is the highest award you can get for your teaching at the university. And to be honest, I was pretty blown away by that award, because I've already told you, I love what I do. I love what I do though, you know, like to me it's not so much a job, it's like, man, I get to stand up in front of people and tell them what I think about things, you know. But probably better than that one was the 2 years prior to that. I actually won what's called Lecturer of the Year through the student voted. So through the Students Association. And so I managed to win that in 2021. I think it was about 6 months after my son had been born. And like, I was sleep deprived, like wasn't really eating, I was getting up all skinny and shit, you know, like it was just like, but again, it was kind of like you find your energy to teach, because that's your happy place, you know, and you know that you can make an impact on students' lives, you can make an impact on the way that they think. I love the idea that someone might hear one thing in a 12-week course, you know, because you've got them for 2 to 4 hours every week for 12 weeks, you know, and I love the idea that something in that 12 weeks might resonate with them and stay with them for life, you know, or it might create a shift or a spark, or, you know, I've had, because I teach into a lot of disciplines. I teach into the Faculty of Health through my sports stuff, so in the sport degree, but also into social work and criminal justice, because through Te Tiriti it's all kind of co-coded through. And what's really, really awesome is when you get students that are perhaps studying social work, or they might be studying criminal justice or law, and then do a paper and something clicks in them, and then all of a sudden they're doing a Māori and Indigenous studies minor on top of that, you know, and it's like, yeah, cool, you want to know more, there's a hunger there. So those awards, they're awesome, and, you know, they take pride and place on the shelves, but the student voted ones, those ones are the really cool ones, because, you know, that they have to vote for you, and students don't want to do a whole lot, you know, like...
Yeah, it's true.
You could probably win it on 6 votes, I reckon, but
I bet you
I'll take those 6 votes,
Yeah.
you know. So, I just love it. And I guess when you're in a position where you recognise how privileged you are in your job and how much influence you can have on people, you tend to take it quite seriously, even though you're not a super serious person.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of went, leading into that question about values. I think for me, like, one thing that I always try and bring to any class that I'm teaching is me. You know, if I can be myself, because it took me a long time in my life to figure out who I was and be happy with who I am. And there's still things that, you know, that challenge that on a daily basis. Yeah. But if I can get in front of a lecture theatre and show these young people, and not always young people, but if I can show these people that me being me has got me here, then probably you being you can get you anywhere you want to be too. You know? So I think if there's one thing that's non-negotiable for me, it's making sure that whenever I teach, I'm giving of myself. You know, because I'm the dude. But I'm talking about the warriors in class. You know, like first 5 minutes of every lecture is dedicated to how the boys went on the weekend. You know, and I'll come in all pody, I'll have a sad face on, and then they'll be like, "You're all right. You're all right, sir. You're all right, sir." And it's like, yeah, no, it's all right. We won't talk about it today. Then I'll crank the first slide up, and I was like, just jokes. We are going to talk about it. Let's break down what happened. And, you know, just that kind of stuff for me, it allows me to remain connected to them in a way that's like, oh, man, this dude's accessible. Like, he's not actually just a tweed jacket and a pipe in his office drinking whiskies or anything like that. Like, he's a dude that we can actually feel.
He's doing that as well.
No. Oh, I wish. If someone wants to give me whiskey, I'll take it. But, you know, for me, I guess, like, if they also feel like they can talk to me, you know, or if they can come up after class and be like, hey, I didn't understand something. Because particularly in modern teaching, we do so much online, you know, and so there has become a lot more distance between lecturer and student. When I first came in, like, we didn't record lectures. You know, you had to turn up if you wanted to learn it, and you had to write down notes. We didn't have an online space where you'd get your and all your PowerPoints and all that sort of stuff. You know, you had to come in and take notes, and so you got to know your lecturers. And when I started teaching, students were getting to know me as well. And now I feel like we're a bit further away from them. So if I can be myself in that big ass lecture room that's only got 30 people in it when there should be 250, but they're watching online. Those ones that are in the room, I want them to feel like, I can actually engage with this dude. I can talk to this guy. He's just a regular person. You know, he's not this sort of, I don't know how many academics you hang out with, but some of them can.
Removed.
They don't feel so accessible, you know, or they, you know, their egos kind of get the better of them. But I think for me, I just want to be me. And
we're all human at the end of the day.
100%.
You know, I'm here to help you, but we're all human, and
that's it. I mean, it's the same reason I don't really take a really punitive approach to students if they miss assessments or if they've got things going on. Like, so many students are scared to ask for an extension. But what a lot of people don't realise is that students these days, they're working 30 plus hours. You know, they've got family commitments, they've got church commitments, they've got sports commitments, they might be in rep teams, you know, and they're trying to make everything work. And let's be honest, their academic pathway probably isn't their priority. You know, and so I want them to know that, hey, if I just talk to Philly and I send him an email and be like, hey, bro, I'm not going to actually get this in on time, I'm going to tell you, sweet, have the weekend. If you haven't got it done by Monday, come back to me. All right, let's talk about it. Because there's so much pressure on students now that I didn't have to face, you know. I got a student allowance that I didn't have to pay back in the government those days, you know. They're just giving out money, you know. And so But kids don't have that now.
No.
They don't have that now. So, yeah, if I can make their time a little bit easier just by being myself and them feeling like they can access me, then sweet.
And that comes back tenfold. So what's your approach to leadership when you're working in these different, because you work in a lot of different areas, and now you've named another one that you are now in charge of as well with Major League. So what is your approach to leadership? Do you have an approach to leadership?
Probably the same as my teaching, just be me.
Yeah.
I think I don't really know. I mean, one thing I will say is that I'll give anything a go.
Yeah.
Like Mum used to have this book in her bookshelf, and it's now in my bookshelf, and I've never read it, but I read the spine of it every day, and I think it's Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
Yeah.
And so I don't actually know what's in that book, but I know Mum, she had really bad mental health problems. As a kid, spent a lot of time when she was in hospitals and stuff like that as a kid. And I know that part of her building the resilience and strength came through having to go to rock bottom and all of those sorts of things. So I constantly try and just sort of channel her, because if she can get through everything that she got through, solo mum, in and out of mental health hospitals, and we're talking like months at a time, all of those things, sacrifice everything she did so that I can end up where I am now. If I can channel just a little micro amount of that, what can I do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when it comes to leadership, I don't know if I even think about it as leadership. I think about it as, okay, well, there's a challenge. Let's have a crack. I don't think we can be afraid of failure. Like, it scares the shit out of me, but like I'm not afraid. Does that even make sense? Like it's a weird way to put it, right? But like you're sitting there anxious as, like I could quit. No one would think less of me. I don't have to do this. Or I can sit in that anxiety, can stay up all night the night before and not sleep and go, you know what, flag it. I'll give my best. I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
And so I think I feel that a lot.
Yeah.
I feel that a lot. I have a lot of tutors who come in and work under me at the university. We try and create pathways in our school, which is really awesome, grow our own. They become tutors, and then we try and gently kick them into a master's or a PhD or something like that, and hope that they'll become academics one day. But I'm always telling them as we walk into lectures, they're like, how do you get in there and do this and this? I'm like, man, I'm shit scared every time. I mean, I've been teaching at this university for coming up 2008, so coming up 16 years, and I get nervous before every class.
Wow.
Every class, and I think that's because as soon as you're not anxious or you're not nervous or you're not worried, I think you care less, or you're becoming complacent.
Yeah.
And I think athletes have the same thing,
Okay.
Before a game, if you're not anxious, then you're probably taking the opposition lightly, or you're perhaps getting ahead of yourself in terms of your own ability. So I think there's a bit of accountability in that as well. I'm nervous, I'm scared, but we'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's great leadership or not. I don't know if it's good leadership, but I think that's kind of how I face things.
Yeah, well, I think that's transparent and honest leadership, which is a big part of just being human. You're not, because people have all kinds of answers like, I'm a strength-based leader and I'm this and that. But if you're just being you, and from all the experiences you've had in your life and having an amazing mum like that, who's a role model and a foundational piece, like, you're empathetic as a result of those things, and you can see bigger picture things that other people probably can't. So I think all of those things just contribute, like you said, just you being you in those environments. But you also know your words matter, and your time, like for the fact that your door is always open kind of thing, that matters. And just even if that's for one kid who that was the moment that the wheels could have totally fallen off, but you don't let that happen because you're like, it's all good.
And I've always said that, even if it's one kid.
Yeah.
Even if it's just one kid that gets something out of it, then sweet.
It can be on the 80 card as well.
Yeah. Because it's funny though, you talk about the different types of leadership and stuff like that. Like, we actually teach leadership theory as part of our wānanga courses, and I don't usually teach that wānanga, but I have taught it before. You've got servant leadership, and you've got all this other stuff, and I think there's elements of all of them that are really great. I don't think anything's wrong. But I think as long as, you used the word empathy. Yeah. I think as long as you can have some empathy and some criticality, then you're probably going to be all right.
Yeah.
Very
cool. So tell us about your youth wānanga with the Cut Collective and how you use kia ora. I'm really intrigued by this. So
Yeah, sweet. So I've got to put a little caveat here. I'm taking a bit of a step back from that stuff because we've got a really great young activator that we've had on the books for a couple of years now, and we're sort of pushing him to the forefront. But the Cut Collective has a bit of whakapapa. So my wife is actually, she was a PT by trade.
Yeah.
And so when we'd been together for a couple of years, and it was kind of like we were looking at alternative options for her mahi because, you know, with PTs, you're charging people $60 an hour, and like we're community-oriented people. She's like, I don't want to do this.
Yep.
Like I love the fitness, I love being in the gym, all that sort of jazz, but I don't want to charge people $60 an hour just to sit with me. I'd rather say, hey, come work out with me for free, and I'll just take my hourly rate at the gym. You know? And so we started thinking about how can we utilize that in a way that's going to be beneficial to our community. So we started the Cut Functional Fitness initially, which was a small community gym, and to be fair, it wasn't much bigger than the studio, maybe 1.5, 2 times the size of this. And we ran that for a while with another friend of ours, Hippity Harris. And then we kind of got recognized in the community, like, hey, these guys are running this little gym thing. And then we had a whānau order commissioning group come in and say, hey, would you like some funding to take it to the next level? And we're like, nope. Nope, because then we have to write reports and we're accountable, and then we've got to charge people and all that sort of jazz. And they're like, oh, well, there's a bit of flex. Why don't you tell us what you want to do? So Steph went away. Steph's my wife.
She sounds like a legend, by the way.
She's amazing. She's amazing. She goes away on this sort of 3-day wānanga where they had to pitch it as a business model.
Yeah.
And the words that she was told were, you're cutting yourselves at the wrists. That's what they said. And she said, well, we're not trying to make money. We've got day jobs. The reason we're doing this is because we want healthier communities. So they said, we hate your business model, it's terrible, but how much do you want? Wow. And we're like, okay, cool. And so all of a sudden we're on the phone to Industrial Athletic, getting all the latest kit. We're kitting out this space. It was gangster, it was mean. And then next thing you know, we're up at 5 o'clock every morning running sessions at 6 a.m. And then getting our big boy ready for school, dropping him off, going to work, coming home, running more sessions at night. So it became a real labour of love for sort of 6-7 years. Towards the back end of that time, so Hippity, who I mentioned before, who was another co-founder with us, he had been sort of trying to bring to life kia ora as a sport in Waitaha in the Canterbury region. And I actually supervised his master's thesis on kia ora. And so he'd been running these sort of school competitions and things like that. By this time, kia ora was starting to blow up in the school scene. We were getting a bit tired from getting up at 5 a.m. every day and then working through till sort of 7:30 every night, doing the gym thing. And then next thing that we knew, we were offering kids to come to these rangatahi wānanga where we could use kia ora as a model for leadership and well-being. And so we've been doing those this is our 3rd year running them. And they're cool, we do them every quarter, so we're not spending a whole lot of time getting up early in the morning and all that jazz, but we are spending like good intensive time sort of over 2 nights or 2 days, 3 days, often culminating in a tournament.
Yeah.
And so different kura from around the region who are engaged with kia ora, they'll bring their akunga, their students and their staff along, and we'll have them for a few days. We'll talk about different models of leadership through a kaupapa Māori lens. We'll get in the gym, we'll do some testing, we'll do some sort of high performance academy stuff, which, because they're all athletes, that's what they want to do really. But we teach them how to cook. We do different life skills stuff with them. Just I guess all the things that we didn't have as kids from trusted adult mentors around the neighbourhood, so. But like I said, we're getting a bit along in the tooth now, and while I might be relatable to uni students, some of these guys are like 13, 14, 15. And we've got this awesome activator called Jacob, and young Jacob's sort of taken over the scene for us a little bit this year, and we're hoping he'll keep his trajectory up. So we've managed to sort of mentor him in, onboard him, so to speak, and now we hope that he'll take over the reins and and just keep pumping, because kia ora, he's growing
Yeah.
at a really rapid rate, particularly in the schools. I facilitated a hui for Sport New Zealand a couple of weeks ago, where we're trying to look at, creating a model that's going to allow these kids who are playing in schools to actually be able to go out and play it as adults after the fact, because currently there's not really many pathways. But
That's so cool.
yeah.
And I just love he's called Young Jacob. Young Jacob.
Yeah, young Jacob. Young Jacob. He's I reckon he's half my age, so he is young Jacob.
Wee Jacob. So why, in your opinion, and I already know what the answer is going to be here because I don't think we do it for any other reason, but why is community involvement so important for you, for your well-being, but also how do you encourage others to get involved in the community and to give back and to contribute?
Oh, man. You say you already know the answer, so I'd love you to share that with me. I don't know, like, community is everything, eh? You know, like it's where our kids run around. It's where we go down the shops. You got your communities. Like where we are on the east side. Like you go to Pack and Save. My oldest boy hates going to Pack and Save. Can I wait in the car? Because he knows that you walk into Pack and Save, you're going to see 10 people that you know. And it's going to turn into a chat with every one of them. And I guess that when you do sort of spread across so many different community initiatives, that does happen. But, to think, we live on the side of town where people don't always get given much hope, and our kids get written off pretty early in some of the schools on our side of town. And, if we can, I don't know, I still buzz out that I'm a doctor, right? But, people in my community still buzz out on that. It's Dr. Phil. And we've got a doctor at the league club, or, we've got this, that, and the other thing. And it's just like, yeah, but, anyone can do this. I'm certainly not the smartest student. I studied league, bro. Like anyone could do this, It's I think being involved in the community is just so important because it shows them that there are different avenues, different pathways, and there's a way out. Even though I still live there.
Yeah.
But there's this is a tricky question to answer. I reckon, because it is what it is.
Yeah.
In so many ways.
But you get to see someone flourish as a result of you being a part of it, like I used to coach netball for years and manage netball, not in the performance, that was just in the club and in the junior reps with young girls. And if you just get to see that one athlete who was even struggling to get to training, so then, you support them so we had one girl who made the rep team when she was a 12-year-old, and she was like, yeah, but I can't get to trainings. So I was like, well, that's not going to be the reason you don't do this. So we're going to find a way.
Absolutely, there's always a way.
That's not the thing that's going to keep you out of this. And I think that's
it's not a good enough reason for you not to succeed.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so just those moments, I think those are the things that stick with you, because I've coached. I couldn't say how many people I've coached over the years now, but and I've done lots of things. But there's those moments where you remember, and hopefully those are the moments she'll remember.
Yeah. Or
she may not necessarily remember, but one day she'll do that for someone else and not know why she did it. But she'll go, no, that's not your time to give up. We're gonna, and I think that's why you do it, because you get to change the trajectory of someone's life.
Yeah, or make them realize that someone cares, or just those little, like you say, those little moments. Sometimes they're huge moments. Sometimes they're very small. We had a moment at the start of last year with one of the colleges on our side of town. Shout out to Aratai College. And year after year they had sort of qualified for Kia Ora Nationals, but they never had the money to go. And so through the cut we had some funding that we thought, well, we could allocate it over here. And we managed to send their team up to Nats, and that was flights, vans, uniform, the works. And these kids probably, we still hang out with a lot of them through the wānanga and stuff like that, so I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I know it was a really special time, and they put on a kai for us when they got back, and their parents came and everyone brought a plate, and it was super dope, because we got to, I don't know, you see them smiling, or you see their parents going, man, thanks for caring. And it's just that simple, thanks for caring. And they might not have more articulate way of saying that, but it's just that's dope, man. That's what we love. So any opportunity to give back we'll take.
I love that. So now this is going to hopefully answer the next question as well. So you describe yourself, I love this, I'm going to get this right, as a really disorganized, organised person. This brightens my day. I think it's hilarious. So tell us why you describe yourself that way, but also how do you manage to take care of your own haora when you are doing so many things in your life, just in general, of being a dad and being at the uni and being part of the league club and all of these things? How do you, being a disorganized person, what does it mean? And then how do you
it's a
take
shambles.
care of yourself?
It's a shambles. That's why I was late to get here tonight. No, I don't know. Organized. Like, you know, I will say this. Like, I'm a people pleaser. So if people ask me to do something, I want to say yes. Like, I am developing boundaries a lot more now.
Yeah.
And my wife's been a big driver of that. Like, babe, you need to start saying no to some things and all that sort of jazz.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. So boundaries would be one thing that I do to help with well-being. I'm just not great at it yet. But the organized thing is because you have so many things going on, and I'd love to be great with like a calendar or something like that. Like, I know I've got things coming up, but it's probably not until the day before or an hour before sometimes that I'm like, shit, that's right, I got to go get, I got to suss this. Or, you know, even driving to the airport this morning, and Steph's like, oh, can you stop at the chemist because where the heck was prescription's ready? I'm like, oh, yep, because I had to go see her and drop the car seat off. I get to the chemist, pulling out of the chemist, I'm heading, I'm like, yeah, everything's on time, sweet, cracked it, everything's packed, driving down the road, go to grab my sunnies, and I'm like, oh, yeah, sunnies, where's my cloth? Oh, my reading glasses, shit. So I scoot back home, and, you know, everything worked out.
Yeah.
But like, I'm kind of one of those people. So like, I will turn up, I will do what needs to be done. I might be a little bit late, or I might be a bit sweaty when I walk in, or, you know, those kinds of things. I might be a bit disheveled.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually on point, just not all that well organized. Yeah, that's how I explain that.
Priceless. Oh, priceless. I really like how you're really aware of how you reassess how you move as you age, if you know what I mean. So you've changed the game of how you do your exercise and how you move your body. So currently you're sort of focusing on functional movement, but talk to us about that sort of awareness and how that's changed.
Yeah, well, for a long time it was all about the aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
So I was, you know, I had a same fella that helped co-found the gym, Hepari, he was a bodybuilder. And I thought, you know, I just hang out in his shadow, so, you know, try and get as big as possible and then as lean as possible, but never anywhere near his physique, actually, I should say. I've been doing him a disservice if I said I even got close. But, you know, the sort of the aesthetic thing, and then there was a period there where it was sort of, you know, I needed the league body, so I needed to be strong and all those sorts of things now. You know, I'm in my early 40s, and... yeah, it's less about that, you know. So I'm less. To an extent, I'm still vain, and I don't want to let myself go just yet. I'm not quite ready to have the full blown dad bod, but at the same time, I'm less inclined to try and outbench the young guys in the club now. And my thing is more about, like, I love running now, and I've hated running my whole life. Like, I always told people, I'm built for short distances. You know, I'm a footy player, man. I'm a second rower. I run 20 meters at a time max.
Yeah. I'm
lucky if I get 20 meters. That's talking it 6 meters at a time. And then just sort of since the start of this year, actually, in our pre-season, we took the boys up what we called Apaki track, and I had my young fella on my backpack, and I was going up there, and I was like, actually, that wasn't like it was tough with them on there, having an extra 15 kilos on there, but I was like, that was actually quite pleasant, somewhat enjoyable. And so for the next few months, I was sort of walking up that track, and then I was shaving time off, and I was like, I might have a crack at running it. And then I was sort of running it for this much time, and then I was like, I'll try and go sub 30 minute. And then it became like this little personal challenge that I could do better. And then I'm not sure if you know the City to Surf that happens in Christchurch. So my wife, it was on a Sunday. Steph comes home on a Friday. She's like, I registered you in Arama. That's our oldest boy. I'm like, when is it? She's like, Sunday.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, cool.
Yes.
All right, boy, we'll go for a run. And then since doing that, I got a real buzz off that. You know, just finishing it and doing it faster than I thought, doing it unbroken. I didn't think I'd be able to run it unbroken. And so, running's kind of been the thing lately. And I guess it's just when it comes to the physical whole world of stuff, I guess it's whatever you want to do, right? Because you can't force yourself to do stuff you don't want to do. Went through a phase of swimming when I had a number of injuries, and I was like, yeah, swimming was great at the time, but don't know if I'd want to do swimming now, you know.
Yeah.
But running's cool. I say that with a slight grain of salt.
A little bit of question mark.
But a hesitancy, like I don't want to say I'm a runner. I'm definitely not a great runner, but I try and get out for 3 to 5K 2-3 times a week now.
Nice.
You know, and that's something that I never used to think I would do, but it's good solitude. It's good time to reflect. And, you know, it's an opportunity just to be by yourself. So, yeah.
I think it's a great point to sort of highlight to anyone listening of, like, don't, there's so many different exercises you could do and ways of moving your body that you don't have to do something you despise every day.
Oh, you've got to find joy. You've got to find joy.
There's things to try, and there's even different gyms. Like if one gym particularly doesn't work for you, doesn't bring you joy for whatever reason, there's other lanes to try, but it's never going to be sustainable if you're dragging yourself through it. You'll get to, you know, we were talking about half marathon before, you know, like you get to the half marathon, but you may not have enjoyed the entire process leading up to it, but you said you'll do it, so you do the run and then you don't do it anymore. And so it's actually finding the thing that...
Yeah, I'm a big believer in anything you do, you've got to find joy in.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's in terms of sport or movement, whether that's in terms of things you do with your whānau on the weekend or whatever it is.
Or work.
Or
like
work, yeah, I'm very lucky, you know, I'm super, super lucky that I get to do stuff I enjoy, that gives me joy. But even with research, you know, we get so many students who want to come and do a master's or a PhD, and it's like, bro, you're committing 5 years of your life to this.
Yep.
Yeah, you've got to want to do it, and ideally you'll still love it at the end, because a lot of people will get to the end of a research project and not love what they've done, you know, whereas I'm still madly in love with mine. So
that's because it's about the worth.
Oh, there's plenty of that, yeah.
Now, you love to read, so tell us some of your book recommendations and why they're books people should read.
Okay, yes, I love to read. Lately, I don't have so much time to read, so I love audiobooks at the moment. So I was thinking about this one, and I was like, okay, well, I'll give one of each.
Yeah.
In terms of, so the last actual physical book that I read was by a Japanese author by the name of Haruki Murakami.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've heard of him. His probably most famous book was called Kafka on the Shore. Yeah. Which is a bit of a mind trip. All his books are kind of crazy. And so I've read about 6 of his books, and I love them. They're super quirky and super Japanese. I love Japan. I love everything about it. So I'm going to say that he would be my number one author. But the book that I loved of his the most was the one that didn't actually fit within all of the other ones that he's done, and it was called Norwegian Wood, which is named after a Beatles song. It's actually a love story. In a way, it's kind of, I won't give away too much. If people want to read it, I would highly recommend that book. It's a coming-of-age love story of a young sort of Japanese guy going into the university in Tokyo from a small town. That was the last book I read in terms of a physical. Yeah. You know, the ones you can and get that. Other than stink ones I've got to read for work, like, you know, decolonial literature and all that sort of stuff. Which I also...
That's still not stink.
I still enjoy it. I still enjoy it. Hey, sad. I've got to convince my wife to enjoy it, though. One of the first things I actually did when I met her is I gave her a book by a guy by the name of Frans Fanon. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but he's a black philosopher, and the book is called Wretched of the Earth, and it's a horrific, I guess, reflection on colonization. Yeah. And I was like, oh, you might enjoy this. And I think she got about 5 or 6 pages into it. She's like, I hate this. I don't want to read it. But now she's also doing her master's, so she's reading that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's really cool. So, that was the physical one, Norwegian Wood, Haruki Murakami. And then there's an audiobook that's on my phone over there, but it's called Butter. And it's also a Japanese author, but it's about a woman who, she's a journalist, right? And she's kind of, it has little takes on terms of the patriarchal society. She's trying to move up the ranks as a journalist, but, you know, she'd be the first editor at this magazine if she could really crack a mean story. And she ends up befriending this woman who's in prison, who's alleged to have killed 3 men. And the book's called Butter because the woman in it is obsessed with butter and quality ingredients and cooking. I know it's all over the place, right? Yeah. But Yeah. It's kind of it's an odd one. It's like an 18-hour audiobook, so it's a long one. I've still got about an hour and a half to go, so I haven't quite cracked the end of it. But I would recommend it for people who want to go into a deep dive into culinary school stuff, like you're learning about French cuisine and butter and dairy, but at the same time, the different complexities of personalities, because it's sort of unraveling that maybe she didn't kill these men, maybe she treated them so well with her cooking and her manaki, I guess is the word that comes to mind for me, that when she was no longer with them, they couldn't survive without her. You know, so it's a bit of a take on society and all that sort of stuff, and perceptions of gender roles and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so it's two very different books, but two recommendations I'd make in a really long-winded way.
I love that. I love that. To finish up for this, who is a person or who are some people who have really positively impacted your life and why?
Oh, Mum. It's got to be Mum, yeah. She's, like I said before, like in hindsight, I have a lot of regrets in terms of periods of my life with my relationship with my mum, and perhaps not understanding her as much as I would now. But I think that everything that she went through, that in turn I went through, has allowed me to understand people a lot better. So absolutely, Mum, my wife, my sons, just everyone in my close circle, and that, you know, it extends beyond them. And if any of them are watching this or listening to this, they'll know who they are. But I have a lot of good people around me, and a lot of really, really good people around me. But I always flowers for Mum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She sounds like a stunning woman.
Yeah, she was phenomenal.
Now we've got to finish our interviews. We always have a question that our last interviewee is written in to ask you.
Yeah, this is the one that's got me freaking out.
So here you go. So that's yours. If you read that out.
Oh, yeah.
And then answer it for us.
Okay, so what would your best day look like? Far out. Is this like a hypothetical day? Or is
you can take, I don't know, you can. That's from Professor Grant Schofield, so you can take that anywhere you like.
Okay. So I'm really lucky that in my job, I currently have Wednesdays where I don't do any teaching. I work from home. And so my youngest son, who's at daycare, we keep him home on Wednesdays. And so every Wednesday, it's me and him, we do something. This year we've been to the zoo we've probably missed 4 Wednesdays of the year this year. We've gone to the zoo every Wednesday. We've just started going swimming because the weather's getting a bit shit for the zoo, so we get swimming inside. So currently my best days are Wednesdays, just because it's me and him, we do our thing. What would my best day look like if it was a hypothetical? It would be that same day, but with my wife and our older boy too. Yeah, that'd be my best days. My best days is just family. I love having been able to create what I didn't have. Yeah. And so my best days always look like something to do with family, even though it'll last about 20 minutes before we're all mad at each other and and all that jazz. But that 20 minutes will be me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool. Well, thank you so much, Phil. This has been such a cool interview, and I know there's so many learnings to take away. There's so many things that will hopefully challenge people's thinking to go away and go, oh, I need to learn more about that. But also there's just so much heart and empathy in here that I think a lot of teachers can also learn. You know, if you have gotten a bit complacent in teaching, whether it's in university or in schools, whether it's high school, primary, like find that thing that brings the joy, so that you bring that each day and bring yourself to it. You know, don't park yourself at the door and come in as someone else. Bring pieces of you with
absolutely
inside and connect with the people that you're teaching, and I think that would make a world of difference to our kids and to our students.
I think so too, and I just have to shout out to like my best mate Ash. The word joy, whenever I use it, I think of him because I'm not sure if you've heard of She Is Not Your Rehab.
Yes.
So a good friend of ours, Matt, is the founder of that, and he invited a bunch of us to provide words for our partners and these sorts of things. And my bro, he's got a beautiful wife, he's got beautiful daughters, and his word was joy. Mine was something else, and that's for another day. But every time I hear that word, I think of the happiness that he has with her, which is what I think everyone should be striving to find in whatever field it is. Like, man, if it gives you joy, it's got to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's our message to take away. So thank you so much.
Cool, thank you.
We'll see you again next time. Ka kite.